What is going on, NFL fans? Welcome back to the J All Day Show. Today I have a great episode for you guys. Indianapolis Colts versus the Houston Texans, one of my favorite games of week one. We're going to break down this entire game. We're going to go over the rosters, the adds and losses on the offseason, and who I ultimately think wins this game. Wow, Anthony Richardson is back. He only played 4 games last year. He looked pretty good in those first 4 games, so I'm really interested to see how he's going to be this year. They drafted Adonai Mitchell to pair with Michael Pittman Jr., an awesome addition, one of the best wide receivers in this draft. I think he's going to be a steal. Then they got Laiatu Latu, my favorite defensive player in this entire draft. He's going to fit in great with that defense. They're led by head coach Shane Steichen, one of my favorite young coaches in the NFL. And somehow Jonathan Taylor is still only 25. They're bringing back that offensive line that was very, very good last year. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch this Colts team. Now, let's talk about the Texans for a little bit. They have the reigning Offensive Rookie of the Year in C.J. Stroud. Rookie of the Year defense, Will Anderson Jr. Oh my God, this team is unbelievable. And then they did great this offseason bringing in Joe Mixon. He's not only a great runner, but he's really, really good out of the backfield using his hands. I love the additions they made. Then they got Stephon Diggs to go with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Crazy, crazy additions. DeMeco Ryans is in year 2. He did a great job last year. I think he's going to be even better this year. There are some changes on defense. There's like 6 starters swapping out on this Houston Texans defense. Some upgrades, some downgrades. So we'll have to see how that plays out. All right, let's get into these predictions. The first thing I want to talk about in today's video is go over all the draft picks for the Colts and the Texans. Show you what picks I like and what players are going to be impact players for these teams early in the season. All right, Laiatu Latu, man. If you watch the tape on him, he is an absolute stud in every stretch of the imagination. He works great in a 4-3 defense. He could be a 3-4 outside backer. He could be anyone they want him to be in this defense. He's probably going to line up with his hand in the dirt in the Colts base 4-3 defense. But oh my gosh, he just overmatched everybody in college, man. I can't believe he fell this late in the draft. I mean, I guess 15 is not super late, but the talent he has is crazy. I mean, in most drafts, this draft was so offensive heavy in like the first 12 picks or whatever. Like, he's a top 10 pick in my opinion. Great, great pick. And then Adonai Mitchell, getting him at pick 20 in the second round, 88 grade. He's got great size, 6'2", 205. He can run all the routes on the tree. He's just not a deep threat. He can run those middle of the field routes as well. Those hook routes, those comebacks. I think he can do the slants as well. He's got enough speed to do all that stuff. He's a really good player, man. I think they really did good in the front half of this draft. Then they brought in Matt Goncalves from Pittsburgh. I think he was, kind of an unheralded guy in a draft with a lot of good offensive linemen. 6'6", 327, 77 grade in the third round, pick 15. Great pick. And I really like Tanner Bordellini out of Wisconsin too. He was one of the top centers in this draft, in my opinion. He fell kind of later. I thought he would be a third round pick. The rest of the draft, these 5th round picks, 6th and 7th round picks, I don't even know if most of these guys are going to make the roster. They're not great. Most of their grades are in the 50s and 40s. I mean, they did okay in the second part of this draft, but the first 4 picks really, really good for the Colts. All right, now let's move on to Houston. They didn't have a first-round pick, unfortunately, but they did have 2 second-round picks. They got Kamari Lassiter, the cornerback from Georgia, very good player, 85 overall grade from ESPN. He fell a little bit later than I think most people thought. He probably has first-round talent. If there wasn't this crazy first half of the draft, all these offensive players picked, he's probably a day 1 guy in the first round. Then Blake Fisher, another unheralded guy, right? Because he was kind of overshadowed by Joe Alt, who went early in this draft. But he's still a really good player, too. Good size, 6'6", 310. Solid player. Played right tackle at Notre Dame. Then they went Kalen Bullock, the safety from USC. He was definitely a top 5 safety in this draft, in my opinion. Then they went tight end in the 4th round, Cade Stover from Ohio State. In my opinion, this draft wasn't too top heavy on tight ends not named Brock Bowers. It was Brock Bowers and then a huge drop-off in talent, in my opinion. I don't think we're going to see too many superstars from the tight end position coming out of this draft. And then they had a bunch of really late round picks. 2 6th-round picks, 3 7th-round picks. I did like Solomon Byrd at USC. I thought he was a decent pick. But mostly guys that are pretty unheralded guys. I mean, Michigan guy, 6'4", 309, Ladarius Henderson in the 7th round. These guys are going to have a tough time making a very good Houston Texans roster. So pretty good drafts. Both of these teams didn't do great at the bottom of the draft, in my opinion. But in the first 4 rounds of this draft, both of these teams did really well. The next thing I want to talk about is free agency. Who these teams added and who left these teams. Let's get into it. All right, Colts fans, let's talk about your offseason a little bit. Not a lot of players moved on. They re-signed a lot of their core players, like Zaire Franklin. He's not on this list for whatever reason. And who moved on? Gardner Minshew's with the Raiders now, and they also lost Zach Moss. Not a big loss for these Colts. Not a lot of players are gone. They re-signed a lot of their players. Grover Stewart, Julian Blackmon, Kenny Moore, Michael Pittman got that big extension. Like I said, Zaire Franklin, the linebacker, is back. They also brought in Joe Flacco to back up Anthony Richardson. They also brought in Raekwon Davis, Taven Bryan, Tyquan Lewis. Not a bunch of free agents that are really going to push the needle forward for this Colts team, but they also re-signed a lot of their core players. Their best players they brought back. So this is pretty much the same team coming back, plus Laiatu Latu and Adonai Mitchell. They're going to make differences on this offense and defense for those 2 players, I think. So the Colts are looking pretty good. I think they're flying under the radar a little bit. This is a really good roster. I think Shane Steichen is a brilliant offensive mind. He was the former offensive coordinator for the Eagles when they were very, very successful with that offense. So I think he's going to get the most out of Anthony Richardson. Now let's move on to the Texans. All right, Texans fans, let's get into it. A lot of guys moved on. A lot of guys are coming in, including Stephon Diggs. Moved on Blake Cashman, linebacker Denzel Perryman, Devin Singletary, he's on there with the Giants. George Fant, Jonathan Grenard, that's a big loss. Big loss in my opinion. Josh Jones is also gone, and Sheldon Rankins. Coming in is Aziz Al-Shahir, the linebacker. Dalton Schultz, tight end, pretty good player. Daniil Hunter is kind of pretty much swapping with Jonathan Grenard. Danico Autry's coming in. Derek Barnett, he's not the greatest player. He's with the Birds for a while. Not my favorite guy. Then Jeff Okudah, Miles Bryant, Noah Brown. A lot of moving parts for this Texans team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The offense is pretty much the same offense last year, plus Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon. So that is great additions for the Houston Texans, guys. Next, I want to move on to the depth chart, see what's going on, who's starting where the upgrades and downgrades are for all of these units for the Colts and the Texans. On offense, man, looking pretty solid for the Colts. Obviously, Anthony Richardson is an upgrade over Gardner Minshew, who started the majority of the year last year, but he was pretty serviceable. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to have a really good year this year, especially with the mix-up in offense with Michael Pittman, Adonai Mitchell. I'm not the biggest fan of their tight end situation with the Colts, but we'll see how that plays out as the season goes on. Offensive line, all coming back. Raymond, Nelson, Kelly, Fries, and Smith, very, very good unit. I think they'll be a top 10 unit this year. Now let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. All right, Colts fans, the defense is pretty much the same as well, except they got Laiatu Latu, who's going to kind of get mixed in at the D-end position, in my opinion. We got Stewart and Buckner at D-tackle, and Speed and Franklin at the linebacker spot. They're going to have to probably toss in another linebacker in here. We don't really know who that's going to be, so we'll see how camp shakes out. And here's the secondary for the Colts. We got Blackman, Cross, Brents, Kenny Moore, and then Flowers and Jones are going to be competing for that last spot at cornerback. Now, let's talk about the Houston Texans depth chart. All right, Texans fans, let's talk about this Texans offense. One of the best weapons in the NFL. C.J. Stroud, Joe Mixon, Collins, Diggs, Tank Dell, Noah Brown, and Dalton Schultz. A lot of depth there. Very talented players. Defensive coordinators are going to be having nightmares about this offense all season long. Offensive line looks pretty good with Tunsil, Green, Scruggs, Mason, and then Blake Fisher or Howard. We'll have to see how that competition plays out in camp. But they might actually go with the rookie and Blake Fisher from Notre Dame. Here's where all the turnover is, guys. A lot of turnover on the defensive side of the ball. Hunter, upgrade over Gennard. That's close, though. Autry was an upgrade, but he just got suspended for PEDs. He's out for 6 games. Huge loss for the Texans. And then we have a downgrade. Rankins is gone. Fatakasi is in at D-tackle. Will Anderson Jr., Defensive Rookie of the Year. Amazing player. And then we got Harris. And then the addition of Al Shahir is a push. Blake Cashman, a very, very good player. He had over 100 tackles last year. Great player. Big shoes to fill for Al Shahir. The front 7 looks pretty good, though, for the Texans. And we move on to the secondary. Steve Nelson is gone. Jeff Okuda is in. That's a downgrade. But the rest of the secondary looks pretty good. Petrie, Ward, Stingley Jr., Lassiter, King, and Henderson. Not a great unit, but a very good unit. Okay, now I want to go over the depth chart and compare teams. Let's see how the offense and defense and offense kind of match up with both of these teams and see where I think some advantages are for each one of these offenses and defenses. All right, NFL fans, the first thing I want to take a look at is the Indianapolis Colts defense and see how they match up versus this Houston Texans offense. I think they're going to be in 11 personnel a lot, guys. So the Colts are going to be in nickel, I think, for the majority of this game. They're adding Latu to this defense. He's going to be probably square up against Tunsil. That's going to be a really fun matchup to watch and see how Latu does against one of the better left tackles in the NFL. Pay has the advantage over Howard, the right tackle there. We'll see where the right tackle situation goes for the Houston Texans, right? But, man, their secondary is going to have a lot of trouble, man. Diggs, Collins, Dell against Jones, Moore, and Brents. They have a big advantage at wide receiver versus the secondary of the Colts, in my opinion. So where do the Colts go? How do they got to get to the quarterback, right? The biggest weakness of this Houston Texans team, as we can see, is this offensive line, right? They're going to have to send a lot of pressure. Can Buckner and Latu and Pay get pressure on the quarterback? Get C.J. Stroud off his spot. I think it's going to be a tough ask, man. And then they got Mixon coming out of the backfield. Who's going to be covering him? Is it going to be Franklin or Speed? Oh, it's not a good matchup. There's a lot of mismatches. Even with Schultz in the middle of the field here, the safeties are pretty good for the Colts, in my opinion. But I think the biggest matchup is going to be Nico Collins on the outside versus Jones. And even Brents versus Diggs. Huge mismatches. You got to go with the advantage for the Houston Texans, in my opinion. A big advantage, especially if they can't get to the quarterback. Now let's talk about this Houston Texans defense matched up against the offense of the Colts. The Colts offensive line is really, really good. I think what the Colts want to do in order to win this game is establish the run with Jonathan Taylor. Keep C.J. Stroud off the field. You don't want to get in a shootout with the Texans because you're going to lose that battle, right? You want to control the trenches, control the clock, keep the time of possession in your favor with your really good offensive line. In order to win this game, Taylor's going to need at least 25 carries, in my opinion. The cornerbacks, Stingley Jr. is probably going to be floating with Pittman, but I think Adonai Mitchell is going to get the start. I really, really do. He's going to be definitely mixed in with this wide receiver crew. Pierce and then Downs in the slot right now, but Adonai Mitchell can play in the slot. He can play outside. He can play anywhere, but they have a road grader offensive line, man. Very, very, very talented, right? So I want to run in between the tackles, right? Run the ball down the throat, get to the second level, take out these linebackers, have these guards pulling, taking out the mic. That's what I want to see the Colts do. The only chance of them winning this game is to control the run game, control the trenches, and make this a dogfight and win like a 17-14 type of game. That's how they win this game at home versus the Texans. Use that crowd noise to your advantage. Let the miscommunications happen on defense. Use play action. Roll Richardson out of the pocket to make some plays down the field. with the new weapon in Adonai Mitchell and Michael Pittman Jr. Houston Texans on the road versus Indianapolis Colts in week 1. Who do I ultimately think wins this game? I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be really goddamn close. It's going to be one of the most exciting games of the week, in my opinion. Division rival game. This is a really important game for both of these teams early on in the schedule. But if we look again at this offense of the Texans compared to the Colts defense, the Colts defense, guys, was not super good, man. They were 28th in points per game, 24th in yards given up per game. I think that trend continues, right? And the Houston Texans win this game 24-17. The Colts can win this game, but Jonathan Taylor is going to have to ball out. They're going to have to stop C.J. Stroud on third down. He was really good on third down. And, giving up 24 points per game, if they give up over 20 points, they lose this game, in my opinion. I'm going with the Texans, guys. Let me know your thoughts on this game in the comments below. Who do you think wins this game? You going with the Colts? You going with the Texans? I tried to break down as much as I could on this game for you guys to give you kind of where I'm at with this game, what I'm thinking, the additions, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think the Texans are just a little bit better, but I do think the Colts are a 9-10 win team this year. It's going to be that division is going to be a lot of fun to see who stays healthy and can ultimately make a playoff push late in the year. 24-17, Houston Texans get it done. Don't forget to like and subscribe.